organized with the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement DC chapter, and it is my honor, my great honor, to introduce one of the most incredible revolutionaries that I know and have the honor to be in struggle with. So I'm going to read a little bit about Mama Chinganji, her bio, but just know that these words don't do it justice, and that we're going to actually hear so much more about her story, her revolutionary struggle, her camaraderie, her deep sisterhood. Today. So I'm greatly honored. So Mama Chinganji is a founding member of the New African People's Organization and the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. She's also a founding member of the New African Women's Task Force. She has organized numerous, Mama, you got somebody who wants to see you, give me a second, numerous international and national women's conferences. One most notably, an International Women's Conference in Havana, Cuba, in which she worked really closely with Mama Nahanda Obiodun and Queen Mother Assata Shakur. She was invited to interview Sister Assata Shakur. If you have not seen this interview, please do so. It's on YouTube for the New African People's Organization after her best-selling book launched, release, Assata, an Autobiography in 1987. Mama Chinganji continues in her commitment to liberation and self-determination of Black people and is currently excited to be working towards a master's degree in Africana Studies and writing her first novel about colorism and Black love. She married her comrade of over 40 years, who is also an incredible revolutionary, and is a proud, proud mom. So Mama Chinganji, it is with deep honor that I bring you to the stage.
Wow. Y'all ain't right when you all introduce somebody that you really just it's kind of a setup. Hi, baby girl. I'm glad to see her. Y'all set us up, but I am so happy. I am so happy to be able to do this, my little part in my teaching about Assata Shakur. I just think this is just a wonderful lesson to embark on for this month. Assata certainly is a very important person to me and to our movement. And it just goes without saying. Now that blank Chinganji up there, I think that's Makungu because I gave him my login. But anyway, I think I want to start, if we can, Zalika, with the interview, and then I can go from there. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna just see a little bit. It's 45 minutes, but y'all take look, it is me for real. I'm in disguise. I'm thin, I'm young, but I would like y'all to see a little bit of it since the teaching today is really my reflections on that time that I spent with her and going to do that interview. So whenever you're ready, Zalika.
And that process has been a developing process throughout our existence here. That process of developing into a nation has been certainly frustrating at given points in terms of us developing a national consciousness, right. An awareness that we are all, we do, you know. And I think that certainly in terms of territory, you know, we don't have at this moment. I mean, we've been forced off territories that would have been a national territory. You know, we've been, you know, by terrorism. Right. You know, we are not 90% of the population of South Carolina because of terrorism. Right. Being run off the land. Being run off the land. And the objective reality that we're dealing with now is that the majority of us live in the city. The number of Black people who own their land now has been reduced to like something like 1% or less. I mean, it's a, you know, been a process of just taking our land is really, you know, of pauperizing, you know, farmers in general and Black farmers in particular, because, you know, in order to run a farm now, you need tractors, you need all kinds of things, because nobody is giving up any credit to black people that, you know, that has meant the really running of black people off the land. Right. And so we have a different objective situation that existed 20 years ago, that existed 50 years ago, and that existed 100 years ago. And I think that part of what we have to do is to concentrate on developing a consciousness, a national consciousness, and a people, and really sitting down and dealing with how do we deal with the question of self-determination. What do we want? And that's not an instant question that somebody can ask, you know, today and get an answer tomorrow, because what way we decide to go in the future will depend on the objective conditions, will depend on how our struggle develops and what happens. So that I think that what we have to really do is raise the question of self-determination and really address the question of self-determination ourselves, because people have, you know, in the past, they go, you know, this is what self-determination is. This is, and you know, other people have attempted to define what we mean by that. And I think we have to sit down and come together as people and really start dealing with the national question inside the U.S. and its resolution, you know, and how we see it coming together, how we see that. And that is not something that somebody can say, make an instant solution to. I mean, our resolution of the national question, our route towards self-determination will be determined, must be determined by black people really seriously dealing with that issue, seriously studying the issue, and through a concerted struggle for liberation, because I think that us coming together has to be around our struggle for liberation, and in that process we're going to determine many things, you know. And so I think that it's important for us to deal with that question, and important for us to realize that freedom is not something we settle for. You can't, you know, say, well, nigga, the only way you're going to be free is to live next door to Miss so-and-so and take this bus to school, and that's the way you're going to be free now. That is unacceptable. Nobody in history has ever settled for freedom. You know, freedom is something you say, I want this. And if the objective conditions allow, because nobody can just say, I want this and not have the realistic conditions happen. But if objective conditions allow, then you say, we want this and we're going to work toward this, we're going to struggle toward this, and we're going to have a strategy to obtain this. You know, so I can't conceive of a liberation of black people that does not have as a fundamental element the question of self-determination, and that where black people do not sit down and seriously deal with what does self-determination mean. And I take real exception to someone who, you know, it will just sit down and for a minute, you don't have the right to determine your destiny. Well, you know, and I want to know, well, if I can have the right, who does? Who does? That's right. Who does? Because I don't think that we can be part to any kind of formation that just denies our basic fundamental right as a people to decide what we want and where we're going. And I think that, you know, we have not had enough opportunities to sit down and deal with a whole lot of issues, and people have just tried to deal with instant formulas, and I don't think any instant formula is going to work. I don't think that, you know, it's a simple matter of saying, you know, we want a nation, let's get it there. I don't think it's that simple either. I think that where we going has got to be a process of black people coming together and struggling to determine where we go and then going, you know. And I think that that's key, that's fundamental.
Is there anything, as we just began to conclude a really good exchange, at least from my perspective, and I think when other people see that, they will feel the same way. But is there anything that you want to say right now to your supporters?
I love you. That's key. I want to say I love you, and thank you. Thank you for all the support. Black people have been beautiful, in supporting me and struggling, and the only reason that I'm alive and free and here and with this conversation is going on is a result of the collective struggle of so many people and commitment to our struggle and commitment to the future, our future, the future of our children and our freedom, and I think that we're beautiful, we're going to be full.
Well, I want to say thank you, for giving the New African Peoples Organization the honor of being able to interview you, and thank you for your sacrifices that you've made on behalf of our people.
Thank you for our everyday struggle, and for really struggling back then, and for just carrying the tradition of our ancestors on.
All right. With no coaching from me, Sister Salika, you picked the exact section that I want to highlight in my talk today. And I'm really, once again, I'm honored that you all asked me. I'm honored to be able to speak about Queen Mother Assata Shakur. I am about life. I'm going to live as hard as I can and as full as I can until I die. And I am not letting these parasites, these oppressors, these greedy, racist swine make me kill my children in my mind before they are even born. These are the words of Assata Shakur. These words have lived in my spirit for decades. They speak to her refusal to surrender the future of our people to a violent anti-Black state. They also express the ethic that has guided my own development as a New African womanist and activist for Black liberation. In this paper, I reflect on my personal relationship with Assata Shakur, activist, mother, comrade, and yes, badass, and how that relationship shaped my political, ideological, and spiritual growth. I situate our relationship within the broader context of the New African Independence Movement, New African Womanism, and ongoing struggles for Black self-determination. My goals are to honor Assata Shakur as a living teacher and now an ancestor, to show how proximity to her life and work deepened my own commitment as a New African womanist, and to consider what it means to carry her lessons forward in the present. I first heard of Assata Shakur when I was an activist in a nationalist organization in the United States. At that time, I was, in my own words, a developing womanist, searching for language and practice that honored Black women's experience and struggle while rejecting white liberal feminism and patriarchal forms of Black nationalism. I learned of Assata in connection with her arrest and her work with the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. Three elements of her story immediately reached me. First, I heard that she confronted sexist oppression inside the movement. She challenged the uneven political development of women in the Black Panther Party and insisted that Black women be recognized as thinkers, strategists, and leaders, not just as support staff or helpers. This resonated with what Black feminists and womanist scholars were articulating, that racism and sexism are intertwined, and that Black women's liberation cannot be an afterthought to real struggle. For a young Black woman in nationalist spaces, the knowledge that Assata pushed back against sexism within a revolutionary organization was profound. It affirmed my sense that liberation without gender justice is incomplete, a principle at the heart of womanist thought. Second, I learned that she was a community organizer, writer, and poet. She was known not only as a guerrilla and party cadre, but also as a creative person whose words carried feeling as well as analysis. This embodied a womanist principle that the emotional, spiritual, and artistic dimensions of life are not separate from politics. They are, in fact, a part of how we survive, theorize, and resist. Thirdly, I heard comrades describe her as the soul of the Black Liberation Army. And when the Black Liberation liberated her from Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey, many of us felt that they had literally gone to retrieve their soul. Her public statement that followed, issued from somewhere in the whirlwind, was unforgettable. She said, Black brothers, Black sisters, I want you to know that I love you, and I hope that somewhere in your hearts you have love for me. My name is Assata Shakur, and I am a revolutionary, a Black revolutionary. Those words brought tears, and they still do, to my eyes. She named herself first through love and then as a revolutionary. That sequence, love and then revolution, has stayed with me. It called me towards a practice in which revolution is not simply ideology or strategy, but an organized expression of deep love for Black people. At this early stage, Assata was a distant figure to me, someone I revered from afar, but she had an open path. She offered a living example of a new African woman who confronted sexism, built community, loved fiercely, and refused to abandon her people. That example laid the groundwork for the relationship that would develop later. My relationship with Assata shifted from deep, distant admiration to personal connection when I was invited to Cuba to interview her. At the time, I was a member of the New African Peoples Organization, which had endorsed her book, Assata, an autobiography. I had been to Cuba before with the Venceremos Brigade and spoke some Spanish, but this trip was different. I was going to meet someone who already lived in my imagination as an icon of the Black liberation struggle and the New African Independence movement. In Cuba, I not only met Assata, but I was also reunited with Nahanda Abiodun, a founding member of the New African Peoples Organization and another New African exile. To sit with two New African women in exile, both deeply committed to our people's liberation from another shore, was spiritually and politically transformative. Now, I'm going to just step off from my paper for a minute. Let me tell you, my organization, they duped me into going for that interview. I knew very little Spanish. Yes, I had been to Cuba before. I knew nothing about interviewing. And here I am entering a Cuban country and interviewing someone that was an icon to me. And when I think about it now, I think that is the thing that really helped change my life as a revolutionary. So I'm honored that they asked me to do that. During my interview, I asked Assata about fear. The US state had labeled her armed and dangerous. Many in our movement saw her as fearless. I wanted to know how she understood fear in her own life. She told me that she was more afraid of what would happen if she did not do the work to liberate her people than of what would happen if she did. That answer shifted something in me. She did not pretend she did not feel fear. Instead, she reoriented it. For her, the true terror was betraying her people and living a life out of alignment with her principles. What looked to us like fearlessness was, in fact, a different hierarchy of fear. The fear of moral and political abandonment outweighed the fear of state repression. As a developing New African womanist, this lesson was crucial. Patriarchal traditions often define courage as domination, or emotional numbness. Assata modeled a courage rooted in love, responsibility, and accountability to community, echoing the core womanist ethics of survival, wholeness, and communal care. She was a badass, but her badassedness was grounded, if that's the word, her badassness, let's say, was grounded in tenderness and care. On one of my trips, I met Assata's daughter, Kikuya. She was in school in Cuba, learning Spanish, wearing her uniform, and navigating life as a child of political exile. Seeing Assata in the role of mother changed my understanding of her and deepened my own womanist consciousness. In our conversations, she spoke about the frustration and complexities of raising her child as a New African in a foreign country, the daily work of maintaining New African culture and political identity in the Cuban context, and the joy and relief of being able to hug and love her daughter without prison bars between them. Here, New African womanism was not abstract theory. It was lived practice. Mothering under conditions of exile became a site of struggle, creativity, and political education. She was engaged in what Patricia Hill Collins calls mother work, protecting, nurturing, and politicizing a Black child in a hostile global order. And she was doing so while remaining accountable to a wider community of comrades, including those still locked in the US prisons. This helped me understand Black motherhood as a form of revolutionary practice. To mother in a New African womanist way, whether as a biological mother or a community mother, is to fight for material and spiritual conditions that allow our children to live, grow, and dream rather than killing them in our minds by accepting premature death as inevitable. Assata's insistence that she was about life became a guiding principle for me, and womanist activism and uncompromising love for Black life that refuses to normalize our destruction. Over the years, our relationship deepened into what I call a New African Cubana sisterhood. I traveled to Cuba at least once a year for almost 30 years. Those trips were not simply personal visits, they were part of sustained political work to bridge New African and Cuban struggles on explicitly Black and internationalist terms. Together with Assata, Nahanda, and others, we worked to highlight the New African nation as a distinct formation in the African world, to build solidarity with the Cuban Revolution from a Black anti-imperialist perspective, and to center Black women's organizing and analysis in both New African and Cuban contexts. One of our first major projects was a solidarity roundtable with the Federation of Cuban Women, the Federación de Mujeres Cubanas, the FMC. We brought about 20 women from different parts of the US to meet with Cuban women activists. In that space, we raised difficult but necessary questions. One, how do we confront sexism and patriarchy within revolutionary and nationalist spaces? Two, how do we address racism and anti-Blackness in socialist and post-colonial societies? Three, what does self-determination look like for Black women in different national settings? And four, how can our movement support one another in concrete, material ways? Assata's presence in those exchanges was powerful. Many of the US women came excited to meet the legend. What struck me, however, was how excited she was to meet them. She wanted to hear about their organizing, their communities, their studies, their concerns. She did not sit above them as an untouchable icon. She joined them as a comrade and an elder. She encouraged the women to do what you do for the movement, emphasizing that all forms of labor, frontline, background, emotional, logistical, are necessary for liberation. This resonates with Black feminist critiques of how Black women's work is often devalued or rendered invisible, even in radical movements. She recommended books, asked what they were reading, and connected her experiences to their questions. This was political education as relational, womanist practice grounded in listening, humility, reciprocity, and shared struggle. Part of my role in this evolving sisterhood, this new African Cubana sisterhood, was to bring what we call the new African flavor to my sisters in exile. That meant political updates, but it also meant culture, music, language, jokes, fashion, and dance. Assata loves some good fiction and films. Our delegations promised to send or bring books, movies, and music whenever we could. We introduced new dances and cultural practices. One small but memorable example is that we started the electric slide in Cuba. Yeah, I said it. I don't care what anybody else said it. We brought it there. We also celebrated Kwanzaa in Cuba. On the surface, this might seem trivial compared to the questions of state power and armed struggle, yet under conditions of exile, joy, humor, and cultural continuity were vital survival strategies. They sustained identity, memory, and connection. For me, this confirmed a core womanist insight that everyday joy, creativity, and cultural expression are not distractions from the struggle, but are themselves crucial forms of resistance and healing. They help us sustain the emotional and spiritual resources needed for long-term struggle. Assata often said that exile was not freedom. She was very clear that life in exile was better than being in prison, but exile was not freedom. She missed her family. She missed walking the streets of New York. She missed what she called the jazz of everyday community work in the US. And yet, she did not retreat into private life. She could have chosen the beaches of Cuba, which are quite beautiful, and a quieter existence. Instead, she remained committed to raising the issues of US political prisoners and prisoners of war and her comrades who were still in cages. She never stopped organizing. Watching her do that taught me a great deal about accountability. It showed me that being a part of a liberation movement is not the same as participating in a passing wave of activism. It is a long-term relationship to a people and to a struggle sustained across borders and across years. This understanding aligns with New African conceptions of nation, self-determination, and protracted struggle against US settler colonialism. As a New African womanist, I learned to hold together commitments to one, care for self enough to sustain one's body and mind, two, care for family, especially daughters and sons coming of age in exile, and three, care for the wider community, including those still in prison and those organizing on the outside. Assata Shakur modeled these commitments. Her life forced me to ask, was I doing enough for political prisoners? Was I helping to build structures of solidarity? Was I centering Black women's experience and leadership in my understanding of the New African national question? Her example did not let me off the hook. As a matter of fact, there was no hook, only commitment. So what is left? What did my relationship with Assata Shakur give me as a New African womanist and activist for people's liberation that continues to guide my work? She taught me love as a revolutionary principle. Assata's declarations, Black brothers, Black sisters, I want you to know that I love you, were not sentimental extras. They were political commitments. She taught me that revolution without love is just rhetoric. Womanist love is not soft in the way the state imagined. It is hard, organized, risk-taking commitment to Black life. Assata taught me that courage is reorienting fear. Her answer about fear, that she was more afraid of not doing the work than of doing it, reframed courage for me. It continues to push me to ask, what do I fear more? Repression or living a life disconnected from my people and my purpose? That question has become a compass in my political life. Assata taught me that mothering is political practice. Watching her raise a child in exile, I came to see mothering as explicitly political labor. In a new African womanist frame, to mother is to fight materially and imaginatively for conditions under which children can live and thrive. It is to refuse to give up on their futures, even under the harshest conditions. She taught me nationalism and internationalism go hand in hand. Our New Africa Cuba work, our solidarity with the Federation of Cuban Women and with Cuban revolutionaries showed me that New African nationalism and internationalist solidarity are not contradiction. They are necessary companions. To be a New African womanist is to be rooted in our nation's struggle for self-determination and connected to other anti-imperialist and African diasporic movements. Assata taught me that everyday joy is resistance. From recommending novels to dancing the electric slide, from shared jokes to serious political debates, Assata showed me that joy is not an escape from struggle, it is one of its engines. Our capacity to love, dance, tell stories, drink Havana Club, and imagine is part of how we survive empire and continue the fight. Assata has taught us that we have to carry it on. Assata is now an ancestor, but she remains for me an active presence. She is there when I speak about political prisoners. She is there when I insist that Black women must be centered in any serious conversation about Black liberation. She is there when I refuse to separate love from revolution. From the very first time I heard her name as a young nationalist activist, through decades of visits, conversations, conferences, and sisterhood in Cuba, Assata has been one of my teachers in the New African Womanism, in ethics of exile, in the practice of international solidarity, and in the power of joyous, disciplined commitment to Black freedom. As we gather in these spaces, such as this Liberation School, I bring her lessons with me. I bring her insistence that she was about life. I bring the memory of her laughter and her seriousness, her critiques and her care. And I bring the responsibility she modeled to keep organizing, teaching, loving, and dreaming a free future for our people, even when it requires crossing borders, breaking chains, and continually reinventing ourselves as New African women, committed in every sense to Black liberation. And I just want to end my talk by reading Assata's poem, Carry It On. Carry it on now, carry it on. Carry it on now, carry it on. Carry on the tradition. There are Black people since the childhood of time who carried it on. In Ghana and Mali and Timbuktu, we carried it on. Carried on the tradition. We hid in the bush when the slave masters came holding spears, and when the moment was right, leaped and lanced the lifeblood of would-be masters. We carried it on. On slave ships, hurling ourselves into oceans, slitting the throats of our captors, we took their whips and their ships. Blood flowed in the Atlantic, and it wasn't all ours. We carried it on. Fed Missy arsenic apple pies, stole the axes from the shed, went and chopped off master's head. We ran, we fought, we organized the railroad and underground. We carried it on. In newspapers, in meetings, in arguments and street fights, we carried it on. In tales told to children, in chants and cantatas, in poems and blues songs and saxophone screams, we carried it on. In classrooms, in churches, in courtrooms, in prisons, we carried it on. On soapboxes and picket lines, welfare lines, unemployment lines, our lives on the line, we carried it on. In sit-ins and pray-ins and march-ins and die-ins, we carried it on. We, on cold Missouri midnights, pitting shotguns against lynch mobs on burning Brooklyn streets, pitting rocks against rifles, we carried it on. Against water hoses and bulldogs, against nightsticks and bullets, against tanks and tear gases, needles and nooses, bombs and birth control, we carried it on. In Selma and San Juan, Mozambique, Mississippi, in Brazil, and in Boston, we carried it on. Through the lies and the sellouts, the mistakes and the madness, through pain and hunger and frustration, we carried it on. Carried on the tradition, carried a strong tradition, carried a proud tradition, carried a Black tradition, carry it on. Pass it down to the children, pass it down, carry it on now, carry it on to freedom. For Assata Shakur. Asante.
Right. Wow. Thank you for that, Mama Chinganji. We're gonna yes, give some love up in the chat. We wanna bring Maria back. And while we do that, we have time for a couple questions. So again, if folks have questions, you can either drop them in the chat or use the question and answer function in the Zoom app. To ask the questions, and then we got a little bit of time, but wanted to give Maria an opportunity to respond and maybe ask the first question to get us started. So I'll turn it back over to you, Maria.
Standing ovation. Applause. So much deep gratitude, Mama Chinganji, for your consistent words. I feel like this is the third or fourth time I've heard snippets of your story, of your relationship, of the deep sisterhood and camaraderie that you've built with Queen Mother Assata, that you continue to grow with Mama Nahanda in exile. And I'm just so grateful. And I am sitting with mother's work, what that means for us, who gets to do mother's work, the importance of that. And I'm also sitting with the charge, and this will lead to my question, because we have been in conversation, you and I, publicly, around the Free Matulu campaign, around Black August, around what does it mean for us to do the work of freeing political prisoners. And I would want to ask you or invite you to reflect a little bit more about what does Assata's words mean to us now, and what is the charge that we have to continue to take on, to carry on, around freeing political prisoners?
Thank you, Maria, for that question. So I want to say firstly that on the first thing that you referenced in terms of mother's work, and kind of like where I am in my life right now, as after Assata transition, I felt like I was getting a lot of calls or asked, not a lot, but I was getting calls and asked to talk about my relationship with her, right? And so I decided to shift my work on my master's to talk about Assata and Nahanda and what their survival has meant for women gathering. So when I think about the mothering aspect, I'm a part of what I'm doing, what I've done already in my master's work is I've spoken with, done a couple of interviews with people that I took, with three sisters actually that I took on our Cuban trip. Two are mothers. And they spoke to me about what that meant for them as a mother. Um, one really profound one. And when I think about it, it brings tears to my eyes when um, one of the sisters said, she said to, I think to Nahanda, she said, oh, I couldn't do what you're doing. I couldn't leave my children. And Assata and Nahanda both were like, well, we don't want to leave our children either, And so I think people forget that a lot. They are probably, in terms of New African women, not that other New African women have not made tremendous sacrifices, they have, but in terms of them being in exile and separated from their children, and not being able to be day-to-day mothering of children. That's some profound, that's profound. It's profound. And it means that, look at Pumpkin, it means that we had to give our children to them, right? So that they could love on them and mother them. And mothering is just not, it's not given the importance, but yet it is. Yet it is. I mean, how else are we gonna bring new soldiers in if we don't have, somebody don't mother them, right? And I think the responsibility is not just to us as New African women, but it's to the nation. And so when I think about the mothering work, certainly I think about it as, a principle of New African womanism, but I think about it as a nation as a whole. The things that Assata has said in her lessons, like I've probably been through this autobiography of her several times and read several of her other interviews and her speaking and looking into some of her documents. I really wonder sometime because I know she was working on something else that was going to be more theoretical. I don't know exactly what happened to it. But anyway, I say all that to say that the teachings that she brought are things that we have to keep in mind every day with our work because she's relentless in terms of like, we would definitely have a time when we would like chill, but that was after the work was done, right? That was after we cut up what's going on, what are we doing, how are we going to do this, how are we going to get Matula free, how are we going to get Sekou free, you know, and what are we doing internationally to make sure that happens? Where's the literature? Who's doing this, who's doing that, and spending that time, like days sometime, of just going through the work and making sure that we take on responsibility. And then other people that weren't necessarily connected to the New African Independence movement coming there and them both taking that audience to talk about political prisoners, prisoners of war, what work needs to be done. Y'all got to be doing this work. When you go back, there were tons of medical students there. They gave them work to do. What is it that you're doing? What do you do? What do you do when you go back home? This is what you can do for political prisoners. So that's what I'm saying. That particular focus on what we're doing is why Matula was free, on why Sekou was free, on why Sundiata is free, And so that's it. That total commitment to the work has to be there. And everything that you do, whatever it is that you do, you don't have to not do it, but make it reflect what we need to do. Yeah, that would be my response on how that fits.
I can't help but think of Mama Nahanda's poem around there's a role for everyone. If you're an artist, do art for the liberation, for the revolution, right? Just that it is actually an invitation for you, for everyone, for wherever position they have, to take on some action to free our political prisoners. So thank you so much. There are some questions in the chat. So the first one that I got sent to me is, oops, it went away. There you go. What would Mama Assata's call be for us around the latest iteration of the assault on Cuba, particularly with reports that Cuba agreed to open up certain industries to private investment?
I'm not sure that she would make a call and I'm just saying that I'm speculating. I don't know. I'm not sure she would make a call, and I'm gonna tell you why. Respectfully, her and Nahanda are guests of the Cuban government. And although they could be critical, it probably would not be publicly critical. Yeah, that's what I would say. They would be concerned. I mean, I was in conversation with them. It's some tremendously difficult times that they experienced. There's one period that probably probably the time that the Cuban people are going through now is probably way worse than it was a few years ago when they had what they call the special period, where there was nothing available. But now we've got Cuban people are going without water, getting no food, uh, no electricity. I just don't imagine that, although she would speak out against the repression and the repression. Sometimes I'm at a loss to call it whatever it is that that's happening, but it's imperialism for sure. But I don't think that she would speak publicly anyway against the Cuban government. And she's a guest, so yeah, there might be some dialogue, internal dialogue, but yeah, I don't know that she would make a public statement about that. I don't know, but that's my thought.
Yeah, no, all we could do is infer, right? Based
Yeah,
on
yeah, yeah. I just remember some of the conditions that existed at certain points when I was traveling, like issues with racism. Um, the special period really brought out racism's ugly head in Cuba. And I don't, remember them making a public statement, even though there were, concerns and conversations and struggles with those people that they were struggling and working with in Cuba, both Nahanda and Assata. And so, yeah.
Thank you, Mama. I have one more question for you, and then I think that might be all that we have time for. So this question is a little bit of a gratitude and then the question. Thank you for this presentation. Queen Mother Assata spoke about coming together and planning the self-determining effort to liberate ourselves. Understanding all the roles have value. What infrastructure exists to help those who are entering the struggle find a meaningful role that aligns with their gifts and builds more collaboration among organizations? And maybe this is to your experience, Mama Chinganji. What have you seen work well in bringing new people in and tapping into their gifts and talents?
I mean, isn't that what we're doing in the Malcolm X grassroots movement?
Talk about it.
We do an assessment of what is it you want to do. It's back to that same question of what is it that you want to do? What is your strength? And bringing that into the movement, how can we make that work? These are the areas that we have. Can you make that into those areas, or can we create another area that's connected to our principles? I mean, I think it's part of it is being a part of an organization, not just sitting around. Well, I don't know. Find it, do it. Let's work. That's what I would say.
Yeah, there's no special invitation.
I think it's a cop out. I mean, I'm not trying to jump on anybody's case, but sometimes I think it's a cop out where people are waiting around for somebody to find them. Find it, and do it. Do the work.
Find it. There's an organization for you. If it's not the Malcolm X Grassroots movement, there's another organization. Find
Absolutely.
it, tap in, engage, organize. All right, Mama, I lied. I have one more question, and then I think this might be it. Oh, I missed it. Okay. How do we do more to support our Black mothers in prison and our Black and Brown mothers in detention centers? Often feels like no one is talking, thinking about them.
I don't know if I have the exact answer for that, but I think as the question before, the preceding question, if that's your passion, it certainly can be done. There are organizations that do that, but if they're not doing it to the way you think it should be done, let's see what we could do, because there's a lot that can be done and that is being done. I do see here, lately, I'm gonna be honest, I've been on a little hiatus with the school stuff, so I'm just still coming back. I'm coming back into the work that's taking place, but it appears to me that there's a lot of collaboration going on between organizations, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good thing because that way we can utilize all of our talent, and it's not divisive. It's working together, trying to build for freedom. We are in a age of severe repression and oppression. And so organizations coming together to do that work is the most important thing that we can do right now.
Thank you so much, Mama Chinganji. Again, a round of applause, standing ovation. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your for the generosity of your time and your reflection. We are so grateful, and we'll continue to just learn so much more from you, and your reflections on both Mama Nahanda and Queen Mother Assata. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You heard this, folks. Find organization, tap into what already existing. If it doesn't exist, build it with your comrades, your peers. We have so much work to do. We have to carry it on. Jomo, I think it is back to you if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. So let's give a round of applause in the chat to Mama Chinganji, to Maria, for joining us and delivering our lecture. So those who are enrolled in the courses, we're going to close out here. You have the link to jump over there. And then we're going to be back here next week with another presentation. I want to invite Z, our dean of the summer school, to talk to us about who we got coming to us next week.
All right, free the land, everyone. Next week, we have joining us Dr. Nathan Alexander Moore, who is going to be talking about the legendary and revolutionary life of, I'm sorry, please forgive me, y'all, Miss Major, Griffin Gracie. And so we are really excited to have her joining us next week. Once again, please make sure that you register. It is the same link for everyone. We want to thank you, Mama Chinganji, for this beautiful and much needed presentation. But please feel free, once again, to join us this time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, again, to see a presentation on Miss Major and also Black trans feminisms as well. It's going to be a treat. We're really excited. We will see you next week. For those of you who are doing the courses, we are going to have a 10-minute break in between, but make sure you use the link that was submitted and sent to your email addresses.
All right, there we go. We are complete. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see y'all next week and see the rest of you all in courses. Free to land, free to land, free to
Free
land
land, y'all.
by any means necessary.